Kyle Crabbs and Joe Marino of the draftnetwork.com. Joe, the trade deadline was yesterday, which I don't know if everybody got the memo on because we didn't get a whole lot of action. But one of the names that was very frequently tied to the trade deadline in conversations was the Houston Texans wide receiver Will Fuller, who's been on the block, former first-round pick, 21st overall. And Houston really flirted hard with the Green Bay Packers before they ultimately decided they couldn't agree upon compensation. So the reports indicate that there was at least a 2-round discrepancy between what Houston was asking for, a second-round pick, and what Green Bay was willing to offer, a 4th-round pick. Fuller, last year of his contract, getting paid $10 million this year for a 1-6 Houston Texans team. What motivation could you find if you were the Houston Texans to not trade Will Fuller?
It's difficult to find a logical path to understanding why they wouldn't be willing to make this move. Obviously, the Texans season hasn't gone to plan, but the dynamics of not having a general manager probably played into this very heavily. And the fact that, let's face it, Houston has botched trade after trade after trade over the last year and a half. And so maybe there's some gun shy there, but at the end of the day, this is the result of what happens when you don't have a general manager in place to make these types of decisions. And it's especially confusing when you think about how much draft capital Houston doesn't have. And while they may want to get a second-round pick for Will Fuller, I'm sure they do.
I bet you do.
Beggars can't be choosers here. And so you had an opportunity to recoup some draft capital that you desperately need, and you didn't take that opportunity. And I can think of no other reason than you just didn't have the right leadership in place to get that deal done.
Well, and that's where my mind goes on a couple of fronts is, if Jack Easterby wanted to make a statement to ownership that I have a vision for how to bring this team back, you should be trading a injury, like it or not. He's never played 16 games in a season, and he has not played more than 12 since his rookie year in 2016. An injury-prone speed wide receiver in a contract year for a team that currently has $8.5 million in cap space and is projected to be $11.5 million under or over the cap next year. So that you're not going to re-sign Will Fuller. You've got plenty of depth in your wide receiver room. So what better way to make a statement to ownership than to say, I'm running the show right now. This is my vision. We need to restock the cupboard because Bill O'Brien pillaged it while he was here in the name of win now. And obviously that did not work. And if you're selling at the trade deadline, you're not selling to win deals. You're selling because you're bad. You're selling because you realize what you're doing is not working. We need to recoup our losses, regroup, and come back at it again. So, Houston getting offered a 4th-round pick. 4th-round pick's not going to save the Houston Texans. But for a team that's going to make one first-round pick between 2018 and 2022, which is what's going to happen for the Houston Texans because of the moves that they've made unless they start to part with some of their talent, this was the logical move to make. And even if you're banking on a compensatory pick, even if you are, because it's fair to assume that the Texans won't have money to spend, so they're not going to spend a lot in free agency. So if Will Fuller does sign somewhere else, what do you pay Will Fuller? Will Fuller's never had 700 receiving yards in a single season in his entire career through 5 seasons. He might get there this year. He's on pace for 1,000 yards at this point, but isn't that a massive red flag anyway, that a guy's going to have a career year and a contract year?
It absolutely is, Kyle. And when you think about this from the Packers' perspective a little bit, a team that is definitely in it, right? You feel like they're in the driver's seat in that division, but you think about the NFC and teams like Tampa Bay and teams like Seattle that are just going to be really challenging when it comes to the postseason. On one hand, I give them a lot of credit for staying true to what they believe the value for Will Fuller is. But at the same time, was that a difference-making move that you could have made? I mean, maybe it was just the fact that, Aaron Rodgers isn't used to throwing to first-round wide receivers. But, it's kind of an interesting perspective when you take it through the Packers lens and say, well, could you have met in the middle and given up a 3? I think back to the Carolina Panthers trade. They traded Kelvin Benjamin to the Buffalo Bills for a 3rd-round pick. And you can kind of say, well, all right, maybe there's some similarities here, and that's an appropriate value. And maybe a 4 was a little bit rich and 2 was too much to give away, but a 3 made sense. But, they didn't seem to be willing to budge off of what they were willing to offer as well.
I would have done the exact same thing Brian Gutekunst did, though, because if I'm Houston or if I'm Green Bay, I'm sitting there saying, you're going to let this guy walk at the end of the year. You're going to have to wait a year for your pick. You're going to have to hope a team overpays him in free agency, and then you're going to have to hope that this guy stays healthy and plays, because the amount of snaps that a player plays is also a variable that's computed into compensatory picks. And your best case scenario, somebody gives him $13, $14 million a year, way overpays, and he plays. Your best case scenario in that is a 4th-round pick for a compensatory pick. I'm offering you a better pick because it's in the actual draft order, not in the compensatory window, which goes at the end of the round. And I'm offering it to you right now for this year instead of having to wait until 2022 to get that recouped value. It's better than what you're going to get.
Right. And it balances out the draft capital. You get draft picks in a year where you don't have draft picks.
Correct.
Things balance out a little bit finally starting next year for Houston.
Because if you had an extra 4, you could then take that and a 3 and potentially get up into the beginning of the 3rd round or into the late 2nd round if you absolutely wanted to for one player, if somebody was really falling that you felt like, as a team who does have a quarterback in the prime of his career, the opportunity to make a difference and kind of help your quarterback and speed up your reclamation project with whoever's there next. So I don't blame Brian Gutekunst one bit. I would have played hardball with him too.